What if the wildfires tearing through California weren't just nature's doing? Elon Musk exposed the truth, and it will shock you. The skies above Los Angeles were anything but ordinary. Smoke churned through the air, thick and unforgiving, blurring the city's iconic skyline into a silhouette of ash and shadow. The sun, though still there, was a distant memory, its golden rays replaced by a dull, angry red glow that bathed the sprawling city in an otherworldly light. The wildfire season had returned, and this time it was worse than anyone could have imagined. In neighborhoods miles away from the flames, the acrid smell of burning wood and vegetation seeped into every crevice, homes, cars, even clothes hanging in closets. Local news stations ran nonstop coverage of the infernos tearing through Southern California, their reporters often choking back tears as they stood in front of homes engulfed in flames. Helicopters hovered over the devastation, their cameras capturing aerial views of the destruction, blackened forests, smoldering remains of communities, and highways filled with cars of evacuees fleeing the relentless approach of the fires. Amid the chaos, one voice stood out. Not a firefighter, not a scientist, but a man more associated with Mars colonies than with California brush fires. Elon Musk, the billionaire tech visionary known for his work with Tesla, SpaceX, and other groundbreaking ventures, had sent out a tweet that, in a matter of hours, became the center of a global conversation. Its words were simple yet enigmatic. Wildfires are no longer just nature's doing. Look closer. Patterns don't lie. For a world already on edge, his tweet was like throwing a match into a gas-soaked debate. Social media erupted. Some dismissed Musk's observation as the ramblings of a billionaire with too much time on his hands, while others latched onto it, convinced he was pointing out something no one else dared to say. Newsrooms scrambled to decipher his words, launching panels of experts to speculate on what he might have meant. And yet Musk offered no explanation, letting his cryptic message hang in the smoky air. What made his words so intriguing wasn't just who said them, but the timing. California's wildfires were worse than ever, with record-breaking destruction and unprecedented evacuation orders affecting hundreds of thousands of people. The flames weren't just consuming homes. They were consuming hope, stability, and any sense of safety people had left. And now, Musk's tweet suggested there was more to the story, something no one else had considered. The public's reaction was split. For some, Musk was the genius who always seemed one step ahead. For others, he was an outsider meddling in a crisis he didn't understand. But the tweet had already done its job. It planted a seed of curiosity, a gnawing question that refused to go away. What patterns was he talking about? What had he seen that others hadn't? As the hours ticked by, Musk's tweet became more than just a passing comment. It became a rallying cry for those searching for answers, a spark that ignited curiosity in the middle of a season defined by devastation. And while skeptics laughed it off, others couldn't shake the feeling that Musk might just be onto something bigger than anyone realized. The wildfire season that year wasn't just catastrophic, it was unprecedented. Over 8,000 separate fires had already burned through millions of acres across California, with Southern California bearing the brunt of the destruction. Familiar landmarks, once teeming with life, were now unrecognizable. The hillsides of Malibu, known for their sprawling estates and breathtaking ocean views, were reduced to smoldering ruins. Thousand Oaks, a city that had prided itself on its resilience, faced an unrelenting blaze that seemed to consume everything in its path. Firefighters on the ground were stretched thin, battling a nightmare scenario of flames that refused to be tamed. The Santa Ana winds, dry and relentless, carried embers miles ahead of the main fire lines, creating new blazes faster than crews could extinguish them. Air tankers roared overhead, dropping bright red fire retardant in desperate attempts to slow the infernos, while helicopters hovered dangerously close to the heat to deliver water where it was needed most. But no matter how hard they fought, the flames seemed to win at every turn. For those forced to evacuate, the trauma was immediate and visceral. Families packed their lives into suitcases, cramming pets, heirlooms, and whatever essentials they could grab into their cars. Traffic jams stretched for miles as thousands fled to safety. Temporary shelters popped up in high school gyms and community centers, filled with evacuees clinging to updates from their phones, hoping their homes would still be standing when the fires were finally contained. The damage wasn't just physical, it was deeply emotional. Entire neighborhoods mourned the loss of not just houses, but decades of memories. A retired school teacher from Ventura County tearfully described how she had barely escaped the fire that consumed her childhood home. "It's not just wood and walls," she said. "It's my life, my parents, my kids, every Christmas we've ever had. All gone in minutes." The causes of the wildfires were, as always, debated. Environmentalists pointed to climate change, arguing that rising global temperatures and prolonged droughts were creating the perfect conditions for wildfires to thrive. Scientists supported this view, presenting data showing that California's fire season had grown longer and more intense over the past 2 decades. Meanwhile, utility companies like PG&E were under fire, both figuratively and literally. Aging power lines and faulty equipment had been blamed for sparking several of the state's largest fires in previous years, leading to lawsuits, public outrage, and even bankruptcy filings. But there was another factor, one that wasn't getting as much attention: urban expansion. Over the past few decades, more and more people had moved into areas that were naturally prone to wildfires. The once sparsely populated hillsides were now dotted with luxury homes and sprawling communities, increasing the risks not just for those residents but for firefighters tasked with protecting them. The narrative was familiar, almost routine. Each wildfire season brought the same headlines, the same blame, the same desperate pleas for change. And yet, this season felt different, more urgent, more out of control. Some experts described it as a perfect storm, with dry vegetation, record-breaking temperatures, and gusting winds converging into the ultimate disaster. But as the fires burned hotter and spread faster than anyone had anticipated, many were left asking, why? Was this truly just nature running its course, or was there something else at play? This was the backdrop against which Elon Musk's tweet appeared. His words landed in the middle of a crisis that had already pushed the state to its limits. To some, his comments seemed out of touch, even insensitive. But for others, it was the first time someone had suggested that the problem might run deeper than what everyone assumed. Within hours, Musk's tweet became a topic of national conversation. Social media users shared and dissected his message, offering their own theories about what he might have meant. Could he be hinting at something related to Tesla's solar power innovations? Was he alluding to new data from SpaceX satellites monitoring the fires? Or was he simply pointing out a truth that had been hiding in plain sight? But the most unsettling thing about his tweet wasn't the words themselves. It was the nagging sense that he might have seen something the rest of the world had missed. It started as an ordinary evening in a season that was anything but. The fires raged on, evacuation centers overflowed, and the news cycle churned with heartbreaking stories of families displaced and firefighters pushed to their limits. Amid this chaos, Elon Musk, never one to shy away from sharing his thoughts, sent out a tweet that would ripple far beyond the digital world. Wildfires are no longer just nature's doing. Look closer. Patterns don't lie. At first, the tweet seemed innocuous. Cryptic, sure, but Musk's followers were used to his enigmatic style. He had a habit of dropping thought-provoking one-liners about everything from AI to Mars colonization. But this time, his words hit a raw nerve. Within minutes, the tweet exploded, with thousands of comments pouring in. Some hailed him as a visionary. Others mocked him as out of his depth. Theories began swirling almost immediately. Social media was a storm of speculation. Some believed Musk was alluding to Tesla's solar technology as a potential solution to wildfire prevention. Others wondered if his satellites had detected unusual patterns in the fire's behavior. After all, SpaceX had a growing fleet of observation satellites capable of capturing high-resolution data from Earth. But the most popular theory, and perhaps the most controversial, was that Musk was pointing to something entirely new, a hidden factor no one else had considered. Major news outlets quickly picked up the tweet, dissecting it in articles and panel discussions. CNN hosted an emergency roundtable titled, "Elon Musk, Genius or Alarmist?" Fox News took a more skeptical tone, suggesting Musk might be using the fires as an opportunity to promote his business interests. Even independent media and YouTube creators joined in, with thumbnails blaring titles like "Musk's Wildfire Warning, What Aren't They Telling Us?" and "Does Elon Musk Know the Truth About California Fires?" But as the hours passed, the chatter only grew louder. People from all walks of life weighed in: climate scientists, engineers, firefighters, conspiracy theorists, and ordinary citizens who had been affected by the fires. Reddit exploded with threads analyzing the tweet. One user compiled satellite images of fire-prone areas alongside maps of high-density infrastructure, highlighting a troubling overlap. Another posted a detailed theory about electromagnetic interference and its potential to spark fires, drawing connections between wireless networks and rising temperatures in vulnerable regions. For every person trying to make sense of Musk's words, there were just as many dismissing them. Critics argued that he was merely speculating, offering no real evidence to back up his claims. "Patterns? What patterns?" one journalist tweeted. "Leave wildfire analysis to the experts." Still, there was something about the timing of his message, something about its simplicity, that kept people hooked. Theories grew more elaborate. Some believed Musk was signaling a broader issue with how technology had changed the environment, particularly in urban and suburban areas. The idea wasn't entirely far-fetched. Several studies had already shown how poorly managed infrastructure, from power lines to cell towers, could contribute to the spread of wildfires. But Musk hadn't said anything specific, leaving room for wild interpretations and rampant speculation. As the internet debated, Musk remained silent. He didn't clarify his tweet or engage with the countless replies flooding his account. Instead, he shifted back to his usual topics: updates about Tesla, developments with SpaceX, and even a joke about Mars colonization. The silence only fueled curiosity. Was he deliberately keeping quiet to avoid drawing more attention, or was there simply nothing more to say? Then came a breakthrough, one that took the debate to a whole new level. A user on Reddit, a self-proclaimed data analyst, claimed to have uncovered something startling. They posted a detailed thread examining wildfire ignition points and their proximity to high-density wireless networks. Using public data, they suggested there was a distinct pattern. Many of the fires seemed to originate near cell towers and data centers. It was a tenuous connection, one that lacked hard proof, but it was enough to get people talking. The theory spread like wildfire. Within hours, it had been picked up by major publications. Articles began appearing with headlines like, "Are cell towers fueling wildfires? A closer look at the data," and "Elon Musk's tweet sparks investigation into infrastructure risks." News anchors debated the findings on live TV, while podcasts dedicated entire episodes to unpacking the implications. And yet, Musk said nothing. He let the world speculate, let the debates rage on without so much as a follow-up tweet. For some, his silence was proof that he had nothing substantial to add. For others, it was the hallmark of a man who knew more than he was letting on. But as new reports began emerging about suspicious ignition patterns near wireless facilities, Musk's cryptic message started to feel less like speculation and more like a subtle warning, a clue pointing to a truth no one was ready to confront. The ripple effect of Elon Musk's tweet was immediate and far-reaching. Social media platforms became a battleground of ideas, with everyone from experts to everyday citizens chiming in. Theories swirled at lightning speed, each more intriguing and in some cases outlandish than the last. Was Musk hinting at something only he could see, or was he simply offering a vague observation with no real basis? News networks jumped on the story, amplifying the debate. Morning shows and late-night panels dissected the potential meaning behind his words. On MSNBC, a wildfire ecologist debated with a tech entrepreneur about whether Musk's tweet held any scientific weight. The ecologist argued that Musk was muddying the waters of an already complex issue, while the entrepreneur countered that sometimes it takes an outsider to notice what the experts miss. Online forums like Reddit and Twitter became hubs of speculation. A particularly detailed thread gained traction, authored by a data analyst who claimed to have mapped wildfire ignition points against high-density telecommunications infrastructure. Their findings suggested that several fires had originated near wireless towers and data centers. While the connection wasn't definitive, the overlapping data raised eyebrows. "Could it be coincidence?" one user commented. "Sure, but when the stakes are this high, can we afford to ignore it?" Firefighters too began weighing in. A viral video featured a Northern California fire chief describing unusual patterns he had observed over the past few years. "We've always dealt with the big stuff. Lightning strikes, power lines, campfires gone wrong. But recently, we've seen fires start in places where there's no clear explanation. It's got a lot of us scratching our heads." His statement added fuel to the growing suspicion that something more was at play. The public's reaction was as polarized as it was passionate. On one side were those who believed Musk's tweet pointed to a genuine issue that had gone unnoticed for too long. These were the same people sharing data maps, analyzing infrastructure records, and demanding answers from utility companies and government officials. On the other side were the skeptics, dismissing the theories as distractions from the real problems: climate change, aging power grids, and urban sprawl. Telecommunications companies quickly became the focal point of the debate. Already under scrutiny for previous wildfire-related lawsuits, they found themselves fielding a new wave of criticism. Activists accused them of neglecting basic safety precautions, like clearing flammable vegetation around cell towers and upgrading aging equipment. In response, these companies issued statements denying any connection between their infrastructure and the fires. "We operate under the strictest safety protocols," one spokesperson said. "There is no evidence to support these claims." But the denials didn't sit well with everyone. Grassroots organizations began calling for independent investigations into the role of telecommunications and utility companies in wildfire ignition. Petitions demanding transparency gained tens of thousands of signatures in a matter of days. In communities devastated by the fires, frustration turned into action. Town hall meetings filled with residents demanding answers, asking why safety precautions hadn't been prioritized in high-risk areas. Adding to the intrigue was the absence of further comment from Elon Musk. As speculation mounted, many expected him to elaborate, to provide evidence or at least clarify his stance. Instead, he stayed silent, letting his initial tweet stand alone. For his detractors, this silence was a sign that he had nothing of substance to contribute. For his supporters, it was classic Musk, planting a seed and letting others connect the dots. Meanwhile, conspiracy theories began to gain traction in less credible corners of the internet. Claims ranged from secret government experiments to deliberate corporate sabotage. One particularly wild theory suggested that Musk was hinting at the use of satellites or drones to intentionally spark fires, though it was quickly debunked by experts. Even so, the sheer volume of speculation made it harder to separate fact from fiction. As the days went on, the conversation shifted from online speculation to real-world consequences. Lawmakers in Sacramento began fielding calls from constituents demanding action. Environmental groups seized the moment to push for stricter regulations on telecommunications infrastructure in fire-prone areas. And in Washington, D.C., whispers of federal involvement began to circulate, with talk of a possible hearing to address the growing concerns. But just when it seemed the conversation had reached its peak, a whistleblower came forward, and their testimony changed everything, transforming Musk's cryptic words from a curiosity into a full-blown crisis. The whistleblower came forward quietly, their name withheld for safety, their identity carefully protected. In an exclusive interview with an investigative journalist from a prominent news outlet, they revealed shocking claims that added a new dimension to the wildfire crisis. The whistleblower, a former engineer for a major telecommunications company, detailed systemic negligence in maintaining wireless infrastructure in fire-prone areas. Negligence that, they alleged, could have directly contributed to the recent disasters. "The systems are overloaded," the whistleblower explained in a voice distorted to protect their identity. Cell towers in rural and high-risk areas were designed to handle specific heat thresholds, but as demand on the network has increased, so has the strain on the equipment. Cooling systems that should have been upgraded years ago are failing, and when you combine that with the extreme heat and dry vegetation, you've got a ticking time bomb. The claims were not baseless. The whistleblower provided internal documents, maintenance logs, and photographs that showed several incidents of overheating equipment in regions where wildfires had ignited. One log detailed a cell tower in Ventura County, where technicians had reported unusually high temperatures just days before a fire started nearby. The issue, marked as low priority in the system, was left unresolved due to cost-cutting measures. Journalists pored over the documents, corroborating the claims with public records. In some cases, the overlap between tower malfunctions and wildfire ignition points was too significant to ignore. The findings were damning, but they weren't definitive proof yet. Experts began weighing in, with some calling for immediate investigations into the safety protocols of telecommunications companies. Meanwhile, the public reaction was explosive. Social media lit up with discussions about the whistleblowers' revelations. Hashtags like #TelecomFires and #accountability now trended as users shared their own stories of poorly maintained infrastructure. One viral post showed a photo of a cell tower surrounded by overgrown weeds and dry brush. The caption read, "How is this allowed in a wildfire zone? Lives are at stake." As more eyes turned to the role of infrastructure in the fires, Elon Musk's cryptic tweet began to make more sense. Though Musk had not explicitly mentioned telecommunications equipment, his call to look closer at the patterns seemed eerily prescient. Speculation swirled about whether Musk had insider knowledge or access to satellite data that hinted at these connections. SpaceX's Starlink satellites, designed to provide internet access from orbit, had the capability to capture high-resolution images of Earth, further fueling the theory that Musk had seen something no one else had. Telecommunications companies were quick to deny the allegations. A spokesperson for one major provider called the whistleblowers' claims inaccurate and misleading, emphasizing that their infrastructure met all regulatory requirements. But their denials did little to quell public outrage. In fact, the backlash only intensified, with activists calling for independent audits of wireless towers in fire-prone areas. Amid the uproar, a second whistleblower came forward, a field technician who had worked on wireless towers in remote regions of California. Speaking anonymously, they recounted their own experiences with neglected safety standards. "We'd report issues all the time: overheating, vegetation growing too close to towers, outdated equipment, but the response was always the same. We'll get to it when we can." It was all about cutting costs and maximizing profit. The technician provided photos and reports from multiple sites they had worked on, showing towers surrounded by dead grass and trees within ignition distance. In one case, they had flagged a cooling system failure on a tower just days before a fire erupted in the same area. Their warnings, they claimed, were ignored. Independent researchers began investigating the claims, and their findings were startling. A detailed report revealed that in the past 5 years, there had been dozens of documented cases where malfunctioning equipment or improper maintenance of wireless infrastructure coincided with wildfire outbreaks. While the data wasn't enough to prove causation, the patterns were too striking to dismiss. The media seized on these revelations. Headlines like "Infrastructure Negligence," "The Hidden Spark Behind Wildfires," and "Whistleblowers Expose Telecom Fire Hazards" dominated the news cycle. On television, experts debated the implications. Were these incidents isolated, or was there a systemic issue at play? And more importantly, why had it taken so long for anyone to notice? Amid the growing controversy, Elon Musk finally broke his silence. In a tweet, he shared a link to the whistleblower story and added, "It's not just nature's doing. We have to rethink how we build and maintain the systems we rely on." The tweet reignited the conversation, with many now seeing Musk as a whistleblower in his own right, someone who had sounded the alarm when no one else would. But just as the tide began to shift, a third whistleblower came forward with even more alarming evidence that would force the entire nation to confront the uncomfortable truth about the systems it depended on. The revelations brought to light by the whistleblowers didn't just spark debate. They ignited a firestorm of backlash against the telecommunications and utility industries. The claims of negligence, bolstered by mounting evidence, were too significant to ignore. Public outrage grew louder with each passing day, and major companies found themselves thrust into the spotlight, scrambling to defend their reputations. Telecommunications giants issued statements attempting to reassure the public. "We take safety very seriously," one CEO said during a televised interview. "Our infrastructure is rigorously maintained, and we follow all regulations to ensure public safety." But those words fell flat in the face of damning images showing overgrown vegetation around cell towers, malfunctioning cooling systems, and internal reports marked as low priority, just days before fires erupted. Utility companies, already burdened by lawsuits over previous wildfires, faced renewed scrutiny. Pacific Gas and Electric, PG&E, a company that had been linked to multiple deadly fires in recent years, became a symbol of corporate irresponsibility. Protesters gathered outside the company's headquarters in San Francisco, holding signs that read, "Profit over people," and "Enough is enough." For many, these corporations were no longer faceless entities. They were the culprits behind a preventable tragedy. The backlash wasn't limited to the streets. Lawmakers were inundated with calls and emails from constituents demanding accountability. In Sacramento, state legislators convened an emergency session to address the crisis. Heated debates filled the chamber as politicians clashed over the best course of action. Some pushed for immediate audits of all telecommunications infrastructure in fire-prone areas, while others argued for stricter regulations on the placement and maintenance of wireless towers. One representative, visibly emotional, recounted a conversation with a constituent who had lost their home. "How many more lives have to be uprooted before we take this seriously?" she asked. The pressure reached Capitol Hill, where federal lawmakers began calling for a national inquiry. The House Energy and Commerce Committee announced plans to hold hearings, summoning CEOs of major telecommunications and utility companies to testify. These hearings became a spectacle, broadcast live to millions of viewers. Executives faced tough questions about their company's safety practices, maintenance records, and the whistleblower allegations. One particularly tense exchange involved the CEO of a major telecom provider. When asked why cooling systems at cell towers weren't being upgraded in high-risk areas, the CEO deflected, saying, "We operate within the guidelines set by regulators. If there's a gap, it's a regulatory issue, not ours." The response was met with audible gasps from the audience, followed by sharp criticism from lawmakers. "Passing the buck doesn't bring back homes or lives," one congressman shot back. Social media only amplified the outrage. Viral posts called for boycotts of companies implicated in the controversy. Hashtags like #hold them accountable and #infrastructure fails trended for weeks. Videos of families recounting their losses, interspersed with footage of poorly maintained cell towers, flooded platforms like TikTok and Instagram. Celebrities weighed in too, with many using their platforms to demand change. A-listers who had lost homes in Malibu and surrounding areas shared heartbreaking stories, adding emotional weight to the growing movement. Yet, not everyone was convinced. Industry defenders argued that the whistleblowers' claims were overblown and lacked sufficient evidence. Some experts cautioned against drawing direct links between wireless infrastructure and wildfires without thorough investigations. "Correlation doesn't equal causation," one scientist warned during a televised debate. "We need more data before jumping to conclusions." Adding to the chaos was Elon Musk's silence. After his initial tweet, which had seemingly predicted the controversy, Musk refrained from commenting further. For critics, this was proof that his words were nothing more than baseless speculation. For his supporters, however, it was another sign of his uncanny ability to see what others couldn't. Musk's silence became a Rorschach test, interpreted differently depending on who was watching. The backlash soon spilled into courtrooms. Class action lawsuits were filed against several telecommunications companies, accusing them of negligence and prioritizing profits over public safety. Attorneys representing wildfire victims argued that these corporations had failed to take basic precautions, such as clearing brush around towers or updating cooling systems, even as fire seasons grew more severe. The companies fought back, hiring high-profile legal teams to challenge the claims. They argued that the wildfires were the result of unprecedented environmental conditions, not corporate wrongdoing. "The real issue is climate change," one lawyer said during a press conference. Blaming telecom companies is a distraction from the larger problem. Despite their efforts, the tide of public opinion continued to turn against them. Investigative reports uncovered a pattern of cost-cutting measures that prioritized profits over safety. Leaked emails revealed internal discussions where executives dismissed warnings about infrastructure vulnerabilities, citing the high cost of upgrades. But the breaking point came when independent researchers released a bombshell report, one that validated the whistleblowers' claims and revealed a systemic failure that could no longer be ignored. The independent researchers' report, titled The hidden risks of wireless infrastructure in fire-prone areas was the catalyst for a seismic shift in public perception. Released by a coalition of environmental scientists, engineers, and policy analysts, the 100-page document laid bare the systemic failures that had contributed to the wildfire crisis. It was more than just a study. It was a damning indictment of an industry that had long prioritized profits over public safety. The report outlined specific cases where poorly maintained telecommunications equipment and inadequate safety protocols had created the perfect conditions for wildfires. It included photographic evidence, maintenance logs, and testimony from former employees. One case stood out. A wildfire in Ventura County had started near a cell tower whose cooling system had been flagged for malfunction months earlier. Despite multiple warnings from field technicians, the issue was marked as low priority and left unresolved. Days before the fire ignited, the tower experienced an overload, emitting enough heat to ignite the dry brush surrounding it. In another instance, researchers found that an area in Northern California had 3 separate ignition points within a mile of wireless towers. All 3 towers had documented maintenance issues related to overheating, yet no preventative measures were taken. The report also highlighted the industry's failure to adhere to vegetation management standards, showing images of overgrown grass and trees dangerously close to infrastructure. The data was undeniable. The researchers concluded that while wildfires are influenced by a variety of factors, climate change, wind patterns, and urban development, there was a significant and previously underreported role played by neglected infrastructure. The findings sent shockwaves through the media, with headlines like, "A Preventable Crisis," "The Role of Negligence in California's Wildfires," and "New Report Links Cell Towers to Fire Ignitions." Public outrage reached a fever pitch. The report validated the whistleblower's claims, leaving telecommunications companies with little room to maneuver. Their previous denials now rang hollow, and calls for accountability grew louder. Protesters took to the streets in cities across California, demanding stricter regulations and immediate audits of wireless infrastructure. Outside the headquarters of one major telecom company, hundreds gathered, holding signs that read, "Fix it or shut it down," and "Lives over profits." Lawmakers were forced to act. In Sacramento, a bipartisan group of legislators introduced the Wildfire Infrastructure Accountability Act, a sweeping bill that would impose stricter safety requirements on telecommunications and utility companies. The proposed legislation included mandatory vegetation clearance around cell towers, regular inspections of cooling systems, and hefty fines for companies that failed to comply. It also called for the creation of an independent oversight body to monitor infrastructure in high-risk areas. The hearings in Washington, D.C. took on a new urgency. Armed with the independent report, lawmakers grilled industry executives during a second round of testimonies. The tension in the room was palpable. One particularly heated exchange involved a congresswoman from California questioning the CEO of a major telecom provider. "You knew your equipment was overheating. You knew your towers were surrounded by dry vegetation, and you did nothing. How do you justify that?" The CEO's hesitant response, that they operated within the guidelines, only fueled the anger of both lawmakers and the public. Elon Musk, who had remained mostly silent since his initial tweet, finally weighed in again. In a series of posts, he praised the independent researchers for their work and emphasized the need for innovation in infrastructure safety. "We can't solve the challenges of tomorrow with the technology of yesterday," he wrote. Musk also hinted at a potential solution, a prototype for a solar-powered, fire-resistant communication tower being developed by Tesla engineers. The announcement sparked excitement and skepticism in equal measure, but it was clear that Musk was positioning himself as part of the solution. The momentum extended beyond California. Other states with wildfire-prone areas, including Oregon and Washington, began reviewing their own infrastructure safety practices. A national conversation emerged about the unintended consequences of modern technology and the need for greater accountability. The question wasn't just about wireless towers. It was about the systems society depended on and how those systems could fail when left unchecked. The turning point came when the Federal Communications Commission, FCC, announced a sweeping investigation into the telecommunications industry's role in wildfire ignition. The agency promised to audit infrastructure in high-risk areas, and impose new safety standards to prevent future disasters. For many, this was the first sign that real change might be on the horizon. The whistleblowers, once dismissed as alarmists, became unlikely heroes. In interviews, they expressed relief that their warnings were finally being taken seriously. "This isn't about pointing fingers," one of them said during a televised appearance. "It's about fixing a system that's broken. People shouldn't have to lose their homes or their lives because of negligence." But as the nation rallied around the need for accountability, a deeper question lingered. If this crisis had been overlooked for so long, what other hidden risks were waiting to be uncovered? The aftermath of the revelations brought sweeping changes to the way wildfires were understood and addressed, both in California and beyond. What began as a cryptic tweet from Elon Musk had grown into a national reckoning, exposing the vulnerabilities of modern infrastructure and the dangers of overlooking long-term consequences for short-term convenience. The Wildfire Infrastructure Accountability Act passed with overwhelming bipartisan support, marking a turning point in how telecommunications and utility companies operated in fire-prone areas. The law mandated stringent new safety measures, including regular inspections of cell towers, the immediate replacement of outdated cooling systems, and strict vegetation management requirements. Companies that failed to comply faced unprecedented fines, and in extreme cases, temporary shutdowns of their operations in high-risk zones. This legislation wasn't just about punishment, it was about prevention. It allocated significant funding for research into fire-resistant technologies and incentivized companies to innovate. Elon Musk's Tesla was among the first to rise to the challenge, unveiling a prototype of a solar-powered fireproof communication tower. The design featured advanced cooling systems, flame-resistant materials, and automated sensors that could detect and suppress nearby fires before they spread. The prototype was quickly adopted as a model for the industry, signaling a shift toward sustainable and resilient infrastructure. Communities that had been devastated by the fires began to rebuild, not just physically but emotionally. Reforestation efforts were launched in partnership with local governments and environmental organizations, planting trees designed to resist wildfires and restore ecosystems. Education programs taught residents how to create defensible spaces around their homes, a practice that proved vital in minimizing damage during future fire seasons. But the most profound change came in public awareness. The whistleblower's courage and the independent researchers' findings sparked a movement that transcended the wildfire crisis. People began questioning the safety and sustainability of the systems they relied on daily. Was their drinking water infrastructure secure? Were urban developments being built with environmental risks in mind? What other hidden dangers might emerge as society became increasingly dependent on technology? Elon Musk, whose initial tweet had sparked the conversation, became both a symbol and a catalyst for this shift in thinking. While some still viewed him as an opportunist, many credited him with using his platform to draw attention to an overlooked crisis. In interviews, Musk emphasized the importance of staying vigilant and proactive. "The lesson here isn't just about wildfires," he said during a keynote speech at a renewable energy summit. "It's about understanding the unintended consequences of progress. Innovation is about more than creating. It's about sustaining." The whistleblowers, once anonymous figures, became household names. Their bravery in exposing negligence inspired others to come forward in their own industries, sparking a wave of accountability across sectors ranging from healthcare to transportation. "What happened here isn't isolated," one whistleblower said during a televised interview. "It's a reminder that we have to stay curious, ask questions, and demand better from the systems we depend on." For many, the wildfire crisis became a symbol of resilience. Families who had lost everything in the flames rebuilt their homes and their lives, often with a renewed sense of purpose. Communities came together to support one another, proving that even in the face of overwhelming loss, there was room for hope and growth. A woman in Ventura County who had lost her home said it best. "The fire took a lot from us, but it didn't take our spirit. We're rebuilding stronger, smarter, and more united than ever." Nationally, the crisis prompted a broader conversation about climate change, corporate responsibility, and the need for sustainable solutions. Environmental groups saw a surge in support, and legislative efforts to combat climate change gained new momentum. The fires became a wake-up call, not just for California but for the entire country, about the fragile balance between human progress and environmental stewardship. But amid the progress and reflection, one question lingered. How many more crises were waiting to be uncovered? The wildfire revelations had shown how easily systemic issues could hide in plain sight, escaping notice until disaster struck. It was a sobering reminder that the price of progress is eternal vigilance. As the sun set on another fire season, the scars left by the flames were still visible. Blackened landscapes, empty lots where homes once stood, and the lingering grief of lives lost. Yet, alongside those scars was a growing determination to do better, to build systems that were not only innovative but also resilient, to protect both people and the planet, and to remember that even in the face of overwhelming adversity, change is always possible. And so, while the fires may have burned away homes and memories, they also ignited something far more enduring, a collective resolve to ensure that such a tragedy would never happen again. The Los Angeles wildfires of that year will forever be etched in memory as a moment of devastation, but also as a turning point. What began as another catastrophic wildfire season evolved into a national awakening, one that forced individuals, corporations, and governments to confront the flaws in the systems they relied upon. It wasn't just the flames that changed lives, it was the realization of how human negligence, corporate greed, and technological progress, when left unchecked, could contribute to disasters on an unimaginable scale. Elon Musk's cryptic tweet, initially dismissed by many, became a catalyst for one of the most important conversations of the decade. It reminded us that innovation isn't just about creating new technologies. It's about questioning how those technologies interact with the world around us. Musk's simple observation to look closer sparked a movement, encouraging people to examine the patterns and consequences that often go unnoticed in the rush toward progress. The wildfire crisis also highlighted the power of individual action. The whistleblowers who risked their careers to reveal systemic negligence became unlikely heroes, proving that one person's voice, no matter how small, can inspire monumental change. Their bravery wasn't just about exposing the flaws in the telecommunications industry. It was about reminding us all of the responsibility we bear to hold systems accountable, especially when lives are at stake. Communities affected by the wildfires demonstrated extraordinary resilience. Families who had lost everything came together to rebuild, not just their homes but their hope. They took the lessons of the fires to heart, advocating for smarter, safer practices, and ensuring that their tragedy would serve as a warning to prevent future disasters. Their courage and determination became a testament to the human spirit's ability to rise from the ashes, stronger and more united than before. As a nation, the crisis forced a reevaluation of priorities. The implementation of stricter safety standards for infrastructure and the growing push for sustainable solutions were just the beginning. It wasn't just about preventing wildfires, it was about ensuring that technological progress worked hand in hand with environmental stewardship. The innovations that followed, including Tesla's solar-powered fireproof communication towers, marked the start of a new era where resilience and responsibility were as important as innovation. But this story isn't just about wildfires or one man's tweet. It's about the power of observation, the courage to question, and the determination to act. It's a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming challenges, change is possible when people come together with a shared purpose. So, what does this mean for you? It's a call to action to stay curious, stay informed, and never stop questioning the systems we depend on. What patterns might you be overlooking in your own life? What small observations could lead to meaningful change? Whether it's speaking up about an issue, supporting sustainable practices, or simply paying closer attention to the world around you, your actions matter. This story is also a call to demand accountability from those in power. Corporations, governments, and institutions must be held to higher standards. It's not enough to accept things as they are. We must push for better, safer, and more ethical practices to protect both people and the planet. If this story has inspired you, share it. Share it with someone who might need to hear it, someone who might see the world differently because of it. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more stories that challenge, inspire, and spark meaningful conversations. Because sometimes it's the smallest spark, a single observation, a lone whistleblower, or even a single tweet, that ignites the flames of change.